Make sure you guys hit that sub button for us right now if you are not already subscribed. Our next milestone here at Bengals Breakdown is 17,500 subscribers. As you can tell here by this graphic, we are only 61 away from making that happen. Let's get it right here on this video. I know we got it in us. We are here all off season long covering the Cincinnati Bengals. All you need to know, news, rumors, draft, free agency, you name it. We got it here at Bengals Breakdown. Help me out. Help yourself out. Hit that sub button for me right now. What's going on, Bengals fans? Stone Shields on hand for another Monday edition of Bengals Breakdown. We got a lot to discuss here on today's show. We're going to start talking about Trey Hendrickson because the focus now from the Cincinnati Bengals front office has kind of shifted towards Trey Hendrickson after what happened late last night after 11 o'clock. We had an at-home video for you guys detailing what we're going to be talking about in the back half of today's show, Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins. We will come back to that, so stick around throughout the entirety of this video. I have plenty of thoughts that I want to get to on that I wasn't able to include on last night's video, but we are going to start off today's show talking about Trey Hendrickson. We do have a bit of an update here when we're talking about the Bengals star pass rusher at this point. The Bengals have reportedly turned their focus to Trey Hendrickson after locking up their star wide receivers late last night. Several people have kind of been reporting this throughout the morning here today, starting with Diana Rossini of The Athletic. Does a tremendous job covering the National Football League. Read this off for you guys real quick. Sources: Cincinnati is working to retain Trey Hendrickson, and discussions are ongoing between the two sides. The Bengals are attempting to do what many in the league thought difficult and keep and pay all three of their stars. The Bengals, of course, on a good path here at this point as we sit here on March 17th after what transpired late last night. T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase becoming official. Jordan Schultz also had more to add to that around 7:23 here in the morning here on March 17th. He said the Bengals, even after getting lucrative extensions done with Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins, still hope to do a deal with Trey Hendrickson despite granting him permission to seek a trade. It won't be easy, but they're not giving up there. Also a very noteworthy report there from Schultz. Schultz, of course, was the national guy that broke the story last night with the official contract details of Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins after James Rapine locally had done a great job reporting that, hey, this deal was done on Saturday. Now, I do want to add this in here. It's kind of funny. It's the first time we've talked about Slick Rick or Ricky. He's gone by several different names in the past. There are some people here at Chat Sports that are infatuated with this guy, and I kind of get the upside, right? He's a guy that kind of hides behind a facade, and sometimes he's right with this stuff, sometimes he's wrong. We've never talked about him on Bengals Breakdown, but thought this was noteworthy as this came out right before we started filming. He says the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson have been making significant progress on an extension, and an agreement on a new deal could come as early as next week. Also look for the Bengals to add Tevin Jenkins or Brandon Scherff in the coming days. Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic has said the Bengals are out of the running for Tevin Jenkins. I tend to agree with Paul here, but we'll see. This is kind of our first time here at Bengals Breakdown testing whether or not Slick Rick is correct, but for what it's worth, I believe they definitely will get something done with Trey Hendrickson. The Brandon Scherff stuff is intriguing. He was at the top of my list, number one free agent I wanted the Bengals to bring in. I'm not there with the Tevin Jenkins stuff. We'll see if Slick Rick ends up being right. By the way, in his bio, he says former NFL insider. Nobody really knows who he is, but he's got about 20,000 followers on Twitter. Let's get to what Paul Dehner Jr. had to write. This was either last night or this morning for The Athletic. He said, the arrow is pointed toward Hendrickson returning to Cincinnati. The lack of any outside pass rushing acquisition in free agency painted the Bengals into a corner. If they don't receive a solid edge rusher as part of a return for Hendrickson, any deal becomes a non-starter. It would essentially sink the 2025 season since all reasonable answers in free agency are gone. We'll get to my thoughts on all of this here in a minute, but first, got to get to the pinned comment of today's show. Will the Bengals reach a new deal with Trey Hendrickson? Obviously on the heels of Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins getting done. Let me know in the comments section. Type Y for yes or N for no. If that ad comes here on YouTube, that is totally fine. You can ignore it. Take advantage of it. Get down in the comments. Let us know what you think. All right, first up here, I totally agree with Dehner. Dehner does a tremendous job, obviously, covering the Bengals for The Athletic, and I thought he had a really several great points throughout his article that went out, specifically the part that we just discussed there with that quote. Most of the good pass rushers are gone. There are still some out there on the market, but if you don't have Trey Hendrickson, you're kind of screwed on defense, right? Because we saw how bad this defense was last year with Trey Hendrickson playing at a Defensive Player of the Year type level for Cincinnati. And if he goes and you really haven't added a bunch beyond that, obviously Oren Burks coming in, but that's kind of a minimal type of move right there. That can certainly become a problem for you if you are the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, we will talk about T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase later on in today's show, so make sure you stick around for that. But right now for Trey Hendrickson, it is a very unique situation. I don't think it's as cut and dry as the T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase stuff was. Ja'Marr's deal, as far as I'm concerned, was pretty straightforward. Need to set the record for the highest paid non-quarterback. However you wanted to do that, as far as how many years thought it was going to be for, that's what it's looking like, or that's what it's going to be for Ja'Marr Chase. T. Higgins also kind of a similar situation. There was kind of a blueprint for how that would work. Rocky Arsenault, of course, Caitlin Aoki, able to do kind of these deals parallel with the Cincinnati Bengals and both become official at the same time. By the way, I don't know if it's going to be a joint press conference. I really hope it is, because that would be really cool to have the two of them kind of reintroduced right in front of the local media. But anyway, it is a very unique situation when you're talking about Trey Hendrickson, because it probably is his final contract. He's getting up there in age, as we've discussed, around 30 years of age. And he's also not a good run defender. He's an elite pass rusher, but as far as a run stopper goes, he's very average. So where is he going to fit in on this list? He's certainly going to crack the top 10. It's a downright blasphemy that he's not in the top 10 right now. There is a bit of a gap here between that $34 million range where you're sitting there with Nick Bosa and that $28.25 million range where you got Josh Hines Allen. I would expect him to fall around that $30-ish million per year mark. We will see. I think as he's been kind of testing how other teams would feel about him, I don't know if there are a lot of teams out there that would pay him into that $30 million range. He's not going to come close to Max Crosby, I don't think. Certainly not going to come close to Myles Garrett, but we'll see. I definitely have, not nearly as much thought or, a good feel, I should say, for what his contract is going to look like as opposed to what Higgins and Chase's ended up being. But I do think something will get done with the Cincinnati Bengals when it comes to Trey Hendrickson. Duke Tobin stayed true to his word with the wide receivers, right? He came out there at the combine, said we were going to get them both done, and then there was kind of a, awkward period there. There was the, cryptic posts on Twitter, some rumblings from national people that, maybe there was some friction. At the end of the day, it got done. And he said that this was going to get done as well with Trey Hendrickson, so I tend to believe Duke Tobin. I think at this point, as a fan base, you kind of have to after the execution that we saw from this front office last night. And Hendrickson wants to be here, which is something that also is very, very important here. He's kind of handling this offseason totally different than how he did last offseason. It kind of was, he just kind of requested a trade out of the blue. I don't think from a PR perspective he necessarily handled that the best way last year. This year it seems like a totally different approach from Hendrickson and his team. And, look, I don't think he's a guy that wants to set a record-breaking deal. He's not going to get that here in Cincinnati. I don't know if he's going to get that anywhere, to be completely honest with you. But seems like we heard it from Joseph Osai, and we heard it from B.J. Hill as well, talking about how Trey Hendrickson really wants to be here. Seems to be the next step in this Bengals offseason plan, getting Trey Hendrickson done. More in a minute. We'll get back to the receivers here to close out today's show, but do want to give a shout-out to our friends over at Fanatics. Let you guys know that Bengals Sideline hats are out now, and they are available right now. I've got a few of these myself. Really like this. Got some Cincinnati Bengals swag. Obviously, it's the offseason. Doesn't mean you can't get some Cincinnati Bengals gear courtesy of our friends over at Fanatics. What a great time to do it right now. I know a lot of people were frustrated with the front office, but after their execution last night, no reason you shouldn't get over to Fanatics and check out some of this gear. Chatsports.com/Bengals Sideline is the link. That will be in the comment section and the description of today's show. All right, so we had a video that went out late last night. As you can see here, 11 o'clock. This report came out from Jordan Schultz. I'll read it off real quick. Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins exclusively tell me they've agreed to contract extensions with the team. Ja'Marr gets 4 years, 161, 112 guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. There's also a second part to this tweet that we will get here, kind of a two-part tweet here, talking about T. Higgins as well as far as his contract goes. 4 years, $115 million, with the first 2 years guaranteed, making him the highest paid wide receiver 2 in NFL history. Those are the details right there. Thoughts around the corner, but another opportunity for you guys to get involved with our show here at Bengals Breakdown. Did the Bengals make the right call paying T. Higgins? I think as a fan base, most of us are typing A in this situation. I know I certainly am. There may be some people out there. I know there's some people nationally that are going to say, oh, the Bengals are in trouble. They don't, can't fill the other holes on their team because they did this. I completely disagree with that. But let me know in the comments section. Type A for yes or B for no. I think this is elite by the Cincinnati Bengals. This is some of the best work we have seen from this organization, certainly in my lifetime. There are only two things you can complain about, in my opinion, when you're talking about how this went down. Number one, that it didn't happen a week earlier, right? If this would have happened before free agency, you would have had a better feel of how much cap room you had to work with, right, going into free agency. It probably would have given you a clearer plan, and maybe you've been able to make more moves than you made until now. That's number one. Number two, you can be a little frustrated that it didn't happen last offseason. Because if it happened last offseason, you could have locked both guys up last offseason. It would have been a heck of a lot cheaper, and the money that you kind of, I don't want to say wasted, but was allocated towards them this year could have gone towards an interior offensive lineman or a pass rusher. You could have gotten at least a player, maybe even a couple of players, for the difference in salary if you had paid them last year. Those are the only two things you can be frustrated or mad about, in my opinion. That's it. This is elite. We're going to break down why this is elite. 5 reasons. Number one, Joe Burrow asked for it. Plain and simple. Quarterback one went out there. He asked for this to get done. Keep in mind, he checked off the box with Mike Gesicki there as well. Joe Burrow wanted this to get done. And look, in my opinion, there's really only 3 guys in the league that can have this type of pull. Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Anyone else besides that, I don't think they can pull like this. And people say, oh, he's a quarterback, not an executive. When you're at the top of the league like Joe Burrow is and you're as valuable to this organization and this game, this league, the NFL, you get some privileges. And Joe Burrow threw his weight around a little bit, and clearly it has worked out here to this point with his boys getting paid. Talked about at length how you cannot mess things up with Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow ends up leaving Cincinnati and you don't have a championship by the time he's gone, you're cooked forever. I don't see you ever getting a world title, to be completely honest with you. Joe Burrow is the priority. He needed to stay happy, and you did that, helping bring back T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Number 2, you can beat anybody. I don't care. You get off the bus in Philadelphia, Kansas City, it doesn't matter. Even if, the defense still stinks. Even if the interior offensive line isn't good. You can beat anybody with these 3 guys any given Sunday, and that certainly is a good feeling to have through 2028 with T. Higgins and 2029 with the other 2 in Burrow and Chase. Also, you proved you're a serious organization. We said, kind of as this offseason was beginning, that Cincinnati needed to do this. Now, a lot of other teams don't find themselves in this situation where they have to go out there and prove they're a serious organization. That wasn't true for the Cincinnati Bengals. You had people nationally and, some people not even involved with football just laughing at this organization saying, how the heck can you mess this up? You needed to go out there and prove that you are serious about football, you are serious about winning, and you checked those boxes late last night with the deals of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Kind of tying back into that second point of you can beat anybody, you're a contender through 2029. Every single year, if you're a gambling person, you should be betting on the Cincinnati Bengals if you're a Bengals fan to win the Super Bowl for the next 4 or 5 years. Because they have a chance with these 3 guys in play. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And the last thing here is the onus now falls back on the players and coaches, which I think is a positive thing. You don't want to be in a situation as a franchise where you're not having success on the field and you look upstairs and say, what are you guys doing? You guys are holding us back. They're not holding you back anymore. They just got you locked up your 2 favorite weapons of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And obviously Mike Gesicki was locked up a little bit earlier in the offseason. Is there plenty of more work to do? Absolutely. But the onus is starting to fall back on the players and coaches, and that will start with Joe Burrow, and that will start with Zach Taylor as well. My only thing that I have to add here about T. Higgins, I hope he plays enough games to justify this contract. I am by no means questioning T. Higgins' toughness whatsoever, but the injuries have been, it's out of his control, but the injuries have been a bit of an issue. If you remember a couple of years ago when Jake Browning was out playing quarterback and T. Higgins dragged himself on the field with that hamstring injury against Kansas City, that was awesome to show that he did that for his team. If you remember last year when the Bengals weren't technically mathematically eliminated, he was battling through injuries at the end of that year as well, and he probably had, the game that secured this contract for him against the Denver Broncos. Absolutely awesome. That's my only concern. I just hope he can stay on the field enough to justify this contract, because if he can, he's 100% going to live up to it, especially if Joe Burrow, or as long as Joe Burrow is throwing him the football. 2 things need to happen for Cincinnati this offseason, but I want to be very clear. They needed to happen even if they didn't get things done with these receivers. You have to nail a draft. Right now you have 6 picks, all right? across. You lost your 7th-round pick with Khalil Herbert at the trade deadline last year. You got 6 picks. Hopefully Cincinnati can turn Jermaine Pratt into a 7th pick, get one more pick, even if it's a 7th rounder. Great, but you have to nail the draft. That's just kind of the reality of the situation, and that's okay because ever since you paid Joe Burrow a couple off seasons ago, that became something that you're going to have to do on a yearly basis. Always going to have to nail the draft. A lot of pressure on the front office in that respect. And also, Zach Taylor, we've talked about this a lot. The hires of Al Golden and Scott Peters have to be nailed. Absolutely have to be nailed. It's a defense that you're not going to be able to put a ton of money to, especially if you bring back Trey Hendrickson at a massive deal. And the interior offensive line, you still don't have guards at this point. Hopefully you can add one. Brandon Scherf in the coming days would be great, but Scott Peters is going to have to be brilliant for this football team as well. Make sure you guys give me a follow over on Twitter at StoneShields_. All of our Bengals Breakdown content will be posted on my Twitter page, so help me out. Give me a follow over on